With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at Marines.com.
It's only a kick, a jump, a block. It's only a serve. It's only a tackle, a run. It's only for the fans. After all, it's only pressure. You got this. Adidas.
Welcome to the College Football Playoff Show, where college football playoff contenders earn the right to be discussed and where the playoff never ends. Now, here are your hosts, Doug Lesmerises and Shehan Jeyarajah. Thanks, everyone, joining us here on the Wednesday edition. This is for everybody on every podcast platform. Shehan of CBS Sports, Doug of the world. I'm a man of the people. Shehan, you've come to know that about me. Man of the people, right? Don't you think that's about me? I'm just a regular guy.
Something like that. Something like that. I hope more people aren't like me. All right. So listen, what we're going to do, we're going to invite teams into our playoff discussion. We're going to kick a team out of our playoff discussion. And then Shehan and I are going to rank the teams this week, not on how good they are right now, but on the likelihood that they will actually make the playoff, which is a slight twist, but kind of the same, but not exactly the same, because we're trying to project a little bit, because we're not there yet, right? It's November when we get to the playoff committee stuff, but we got to be thinking like the committee. So we got to think how we think they might think. So we first have to decide, okay, should somebody join the party here, Shehan? Shehan, these were the nominees that I asked our tech subscribers. If you subscribe to the text, then you're our friend. That's the deal. You're our friend for $1 a month. We will be your friends. And we ask you, hey, who should be in the playoff discussion? Who should be kicked out of the playoff discussion? And some other fun surveys, little tidbits in your phone. I think it's worth it. $1 a month, 817-442-6789. Shehan, I asked about 3 teams this week whether they should join the mix. The first one was Michigan. Wins against Wisconsin, runs the ball again, 38-17 over Wisconsin. They're now 5-0. Michigan Wolverines, I asked, should they be in? Then I asked about BYU. We just did a big, if you guys listen to it, it's on Apple Podcasts. Exclusive there. Lots of you have Apple, so lots of you have access to it. It's $2.99 a month for all the Tuesday episodes. We talked a lot about Cincinnati on that Tuesday episode and their playoff chances. And we did get this text, Shehan, in the course of that. Our guy, Brian, who's a tech subscriber, said, I think you have to discuss BYU if you're going to discuss Cincinnati due to their remaining strength of schedule. And my answer to that is no, we don't, because we didn't. But BYU does have wins over Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah so far. So that's 3 Pac-12 wins. It's almost like BYU's the best team in the Pac-12, except I don't know that that's that impressive. So they're not a Power 5 team, but like the Power 5 league that they're dominating is not very good. So BYU is on our list. We'll get to them in a second. The other one, Wake Forest. 5-0 Wake Forest. I said last week we would have a top 10 list of names for Wake Forest podcasts. I didn't do that yet. We have plenty of time to get to it. Plenty of time to get to Wake Forest podcast names. Should 5-0 Wake Forest after a 37-34 win over Louisville, should they be in? Shehan, let's start with Wake Forest. Would you put Wake Forest in our playoff discussion at 5-0? And the ACC has nobody right now. Sorry, ACC. Well, everyone knows that I am the preeminent Wake Forest stan in the national media, because apparently that's what I am these days. But no, I just can't. I can't do it yet, right? Like, I mean, they are a really good team. I think that if they run through undefeated through their schedule, I do think that they will have more than a chance, right? Like, I think that getting through, even though this isn't the best version of Clemson, who, by the way, fell out of the AP Top 25, they'll beat North Carolina State along the way, who's ranked right now. I think Boston College has a chance to maybe get back into that conversation.
I don't know. Like, look at their wins right now. I think Virginia's a decent team. Louisville's fine, and they kind of barely beat them. And then it's Old Dominion, Florida State, Norfolk State. I'm not ready. I don't think I can do it as yet.
No, that's the correct answer, by the way. You don't have to apologize for any of that. They are the only undefeated team left in the ACC at 5-0. And I just don't know, at some point, if you're undefeated in a Power 5 conference and we're halfway through the year, like, we're going to have to put you into discussion, because there's not going to be 11 other teams more worthy than you. But like, we're not there with them yet. And I don't know when we'll get there, because as you said, their wins so far, I don't know. They have Syracuse next, then a bye, then Army, then Duke. So I think they could get to 8-0 and have us still be like, and then it's UNC, NC State, Clemson, BC. So like, if they get to 8-0, I think we'll put them in. Leading into those games, I just don't know how we would do it ahead of that. So you're a no, I'm a no on Wake Forest. The tech subscribers, 95% no. BYU, are you inclined at all on BYU right now with the point that the tech subscriber made?
So what's interesting about BYU this year is that last year, I kind of thought that they were going to maybe struggle this year because they lost Zach Wilson to the NFL, who was a great quarterback for them. This is a schedule that can, I think, get them into the playoff, right? Because you mentioned 3 Pac-12 wins at this point. They beat Utah State, who I think is pretty decent. They get Boise, at Baylor, at Washington State, Virginia, Idaho State, Georgia Southern, and then at USC. So, like, I actually do think that that's probably enough that if they go undefeated, that they will be there at the very end. I don't. This is tough. I'm probably close to 50-50 on this. I would lean no right now if I had to pick, but I think that they definitely have a chance, and it's because they've beaten, an Arizona State team who's back in the top 25. They really are the reason that Utah's kind of in shambles right now. They kind of sent them there. Arizona's not very good. South Florida, I wish they looked better against. Like, they have a case. I think I'd lean no, though.
Yeah, no on BYU. And I get the, like, hey, if you're going to talk about Cincinnati.
That's not compelling to me at all.
I get it theoretically, but, like, Cincinnati earned this, man. Like, chill out. Just chill out a little bit, BYU. Now, I mean, BYU was 11-1 last year. So we talked about Cincinnati sort of, like, building up to this. I mean, BYU, kind of did too, but they also lost their quarterback, and Cincinnati brought its quarterback back. So we will get to BYU. They're very high in the polls right now. People seem to like them, but I am not compelled. To talk about BYU yet. So it's 2 no's from us, 85% no from the tech subscribers, Shehan. So that leaves us with Michigan. Again, we are at 11 right now. We'll kick somebody out at later on this pod. So we're still going to have room. We could have accepted more than one. We are not going to kick out more than one team this week, although we could have.
Easily.
Daniel suggested that. I don't know what the show policy is on this one, but I think we got to be allowed to vote to drop 3 teams this week. We're not, because I think I could show you cases how teams could still crawl back in. If you had a terrible loss, but I can still look at your path and say, well, I don't think it's impossible for you to sort of win the rest of your games. And if you do, you would get a lot of, your credit back. I don't feel the need to, like, sort of jump the gun and boot out multiple teams. So we're not going to boot out multiple teams, but we do have room to add Michigan if we want to. Where are you on Michigan? They have been a team that has run the ball like crazy. Do you think they're one-dimensional? Do you think they have a lot that they still yet could show? Do you want them in?
So they're number 9 in the country in the AP Top 25 right now. I do feel like we have to mention that. They beat Wisconsin, who's like kind of the first decent team that they played, although Wisconsin might not be very good. But they won by 3 touchdowns, right? It wasn't close. They dominated them on the road, no less. The other thing, too, that I have to think about, and I think is maybe coming into my thought a little bit, is that I don't know exactly when we'd add them if we don't just add them now, because we'd probably have to wait until they play Michigan State on October 30th. And that's 25 days from now, 24 days from now. that's a long time. I mean, I think that there's a case because if they win their next two games, which I think they better win their next two games on the road against Nebraska versus Northwestern, right? Then they're sitting at 7-0, and we're potentially not having them into the discussion. I think that I'm leaning towards yes, but I will say, you look at their 5 wins, I don't think that there's an especially impressive one. I don't think that there's one that I necessarily expected them to have any trouble with, especially once we realized that Wisconsin might not be very good. I'm leaning towards yes, but it's like 51-49.
I just want to correct one thing real quick here, because we just like to try to be factually correct on the college football playoff show. I believe you said Wisconsin might not be good. Wisconsin is not good.
But they made them look not good is the other thing that I'll say too, which I think that if you are a good team, you make not good teams look not good.
That is fair. But also, just to be clear, Wisconsin's going to go 6-6. So I do think, and this is what intrigues me about this, because Harbaugh is doing a little something here that is sort of hard to wrap your head around, but it also might be the exact right thing to do. And he is working in the 5-star freshman quarterback. Cade McNamara has been the starter. J.J. McCarthy came in the game against Wisconsin when it was 13-10 on the road. It's in the balance, and they put in the true freshman quarterback because they like him a little bit in the zone read, get to the edge. He's a little more athletic, I think, more of a run threat than Cade McNamara, but they didn't recruit him to be a run threat. He threw one pass against Wisconsin, and it was a 56-yard touchdown that he dropped right in the bucket on the sideline.
Right.
Matt Weiss, their quarterbacks coach, during the week said, to paraphrase, I wrote it down, but my handwriting is so awful. My handwriting looks like I kidnapped somebody, and I'm sending a letter to your house. And I wrote a book about Ohio State, and people can buy it from me directly, and I sign it. Again, I've been working on my autograph. That's where my life is right now, because I'm signing these books.
The king of Ohio, man. Ooh.
I haven't signed my name in like a year. I can't write anymore. We just type. You don't use checks anymore. So I'm figuring out how to sign my name. But then I have to write the address label, and it's like, I am sending you a book. It looks like I'm sending a murder package to somebody's house, and like someone's family's gonna be like, you got this package in the mail? It looks like the label was written by a serial killer. I think it might be a bomb threat. It's like, oh, that's just that Ohio State book I got from Doug. So I apologize to anybody for my handwriting. So I'm paraphrasing Matt Weiss, but he said something like, I think in a lot of places, JJ would probably be the starting quarterback right now, but we have the luxury where we don't have to throw him in the fire right away, right? So he didn't say we don't have to throw him in the fire this year. He said we don't have to throw him in the fire right away. I do think, Shehan, it's possible that they are easing him in, and that by the time Michigan gets to go time at the end of the year against Penn State and Ohio State, I think J.J. McCarthy might be their starting quarterback, or having a much bigger role, some kind of timeshare. It's not that Cade McNamara hasn't been fine, but they've run the ball so much. So I'm intrigued by that, and I'd rather get ahead of it. So I want to put Michigan in our discussion as well. And guess what? So do the tech subscribers. 64% say yes, put Michigan in. So Michigan, welcome to the discussion. And for right now, that means we have 12 teams in our playoff discussion, and it will be very interesting to kind of parse these Big Ten teams. Again, Michigan State, I did not put on the list to think about putting in. They're 11th in the AP poll. I think it's nuts that they're that high. I get it. It's hard to find other teams to rank. I understand that, but they are not at that level yet. I do think Iowa, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, all from the Big Ten, all deserve our attention, and they are now 4 of the 12 teams that are in. When we come back, we're going to start ranking teams based on their chances of making the playoff, and I do really want to dive into this Iowa-Penn State game this weekend as we try to figure out what the chances are of either of those teams making the playoff. That's going to tell us something about who we think is going to win Saturday in Iowa City. We'll do that next in the College Football Playoff Show.
In case you missed the last College Football Playoff Show.
I could envision a playoff that is 2 SEC teams against 2 teams from Ohio. I don't know how well that would go for the teams from Ohio.
Georgia is no country for old men. Alabama, they're the There Will Be Blood guy. Ohio State, they can be like the George Clooney movie. And then Cincinnati could be Juno. But I do think possibly No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood would stomp Juno and the George Clooney movie when it got down to it.
I can envision it. I think that'll be really interesting to see Michael Cera go up against George Clooney in a playoff game.
Get in on the fun. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts for exclusive college football playoff show bonus episodes.
Doug and Shehan, and I'm actually, because this podcast is created from nothing. It's not like there's a rule. It's not written down. Nobody chiseled it in a stone and said, this is how you have to do this podcast. I'm going to jump the gun.
Okay.
Because sometimes I think it makes sense to have our whole discussion and then kick somebody out at the end. And frankly, it builds the drama. But sometimes it's like, why would we spend 2 more minutes talking about this team? And we're going to talk about them. We're going to try to rank them and be like, and then at the end, it's going to be like, of course, we're kicking them out. So we're going to boot early. We're going to do some booting now. Because, Shehan, I asked the good people, which team should be cooked out of the playoff discussion? We had 4 teams of our 11 lose this week. Let us down. But a couple of them played other better teams. So what are you going to do? So I did say 4-1 Arkansas after a loss to Georgia. Should we kick them out? 4-1 Oregon after a loss to Stanford. Should we kick them out? 3-1 Ole Miss after a loss to Alabama. Should we kick them out? Or 3-2 Texas A&M, losing to Mississippi State the week after they lost to Arkansas. Shehan, who do you want to kick out of the discussion?
Well, one of these things is not like the other. One of them has a 2 by it, and if you have a 2 by your name and 2 losses, by the way, in the SEC, I don't think that there's a path for you forward. And the thing is, right, if they had 2 losses, but one was, let's say, a non-conference loss and then 1 conference loss, because actually, we'll get to how we're, obviously letting teams into the playoff right now, or how we see teams, whatever the phrasing we used was. But, I actually think that Texas A&M, the one thing that they have in front of them is that they still do have Alabama left on the schedule. And so, so maybe there's a chance that you can put together a tiebreaker versus Alabama because that's going to be the team that you're going up against at the end. But, I don't know. That's not going to happen, right? They're going to get murdered this week, and it's going to be 3 losses, and they're going to be sitting here at 3-3 or whatever. It's not happening. I think that Texas A&M is clearly the team to kick out at this point.
So, listen, I am almost personally offended by Texas A&M's loss to Mississippi State.
Yes.
Because I went back and I watched the whole thing. And this was this stretch for Alabama. Well, because I wanted to see how bad it was. And then I was like, but no, I honestly felt the whole time. I will say, so listen, we're covering games on the weekend. It's like, I had a bunch of stuff going on. I didn't just sit down and watch college football all weekend. So then you go back and watch it knowing the result. But I felt like Texas A&M was going to pull it out the whole time.
Yep.
Because the crowd was going nuts. They still have Devon Achane, who I still love, and Isaiah Spiller. They have Jalen Weidermeyer at tight end, who is still a matchup nightmare. And the whole game, it was just setting up for okay, here comes the drive. Okay, here. And they kept getting stops when they needed to late. Here comes the drive. Here we go. And then it didn't happen. Listen, Zach Calzada is just kind of not the guy, and I get it. But there's just something about winning football, and I'm going to be sad to not watch Spiller and Achane every week and think about them in a playoff context, because I still love those dudes. And I still don't understand. I know you got Mike Leach. I get it, right? I get it. All right, he's a genius. He likes Pirates. So I get it, but I don't know how they didn't win.
Yeah.
Because they still had these moments when Spiller would make a great play. And then Calzada, as we said a million times, he's hot, he's cold, he scrambles in for a touchdown to bring them back. They had this play right after, I think it was, they had the drive where Calzada scrambled in for a touchdown to cut 24-19. They go for 2, don't make it. So they're down 24-19. The next drive, Mississippi State's 3rd and 16. And they throw an incomplete pass, and there's just this kind of unnecessary handsy play by Texas A&M in the secondary where they kind of grabbed the guy that I don't think it was going to be a completed pass anyway. And they gave him a first down on a 3rd and 16 when they should have been right at the moment of okay, here we go. Right. This is where you get a stop, and now Texas A&M drives for the go-ahead score. But still, Mississippi State, that drive stays alive. They wind up trying a 49-yard field goal because they get 2 straight false start penalties because the crowd is going so nuts. They miss the 49-yarder. They get the ball back with 8:11 left, and the first play is Devon Achane breaking a tackle and running 38 yards, and it's like, here it is. It's right here. And they get 1st and 10 at the 18-yard line. They throw it in the end zone, incomplete. They run it and get stuffed, and they throw it in the end zone again, where I would have gone Wildcat with Spiller and Achane. I run the freaking ball. What are they doing? They wound up like putting the game in the hands of Zach Calzada when they had the best running back tandem in the country. I want to talk about them, and now I'm not allowed to because we have to kick them out. Jimbo, what is happening?
I mean, I don't want to make this the gig 'em whatever podcast, but they are starting right now like between 1 and 3 true freshmen on the offensive line, and I could go deep into the failures along the way that have made us get to this point to where they're starting a true freshman at center now that Luke Matthews is out for the year. But I mean, that's it, right? Like you mentioned it with the Achane run, like it was, he broke a tackle and went. With Isaiah Spiller, it's, he broke 4 tackles. They can't block anybody, right? And because they can't block anybody and also can't spread the field with their quarterback, there's nothing they really can do. And for people who didn't watch the game, because like you said, it felt every moment because it was always a 1-score game. You know, Texas A&M was always right there. The moment, and this is like, I don't remember the last time I saw a game involving a team that's supposed to be good and like this. So Texas A&M drops back. They're like within their own 5-yard line, and Zach Calzada tries to escape the pressure and gets tripped up in the end zone for a safety, and that's how the last drive ends. Like, What is that? I'm trying to remember the last time that a decent team lost like that, and I don't know. I don't know. It was embarrassing. And I want to be very clear, right? Mississippi State is the team that was consensus picked to go last place in the SEC West. And they come into Kyle Field and throw for 400 yards on them. It was bizarre. I think that A&M fans right now, just being in the state of Texas, I think a lot of them are like, well, 6-6, here we come, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of losable games left on that schedule. And guess what? They get Alabama this week. So I could go on for hours about this. We shouldn't do that. Texas A&M's my vote. I assume it's your vote. I'm assuming that's where the Texans went as well.
So let me just, so 24 carries for 169 combined for Spiller and Achane. They're awesome.
Only 24. That's nowhere near enough.
They're awesome. They're awesome. They're awesome. Can I say this? By the way, everybody kicked them out. The Texans kicked them out. It wasn't even close. I mean, of course, everyone. Texas A&M's 87% of the vote for getting kicked out. Ole Miss 6, Oregon 4, Arkansas 3. So they all live for another week, but they're all on alert. I'm going to go back to the well. I'm not saying Texas A&M's going to beat Bama.
Jesus Christ.
But I'm going to drop a but in that sentence. The line opened at 14.5. It's already moved to 17.5. It's at College Station. And I just want to say, there are enough pieces. They've played 12 different offensive. They've played 12 different offensive line combinations this year. If Jimbo, can they go into the cave and draw something special up? Can they come out? Can they make Isaiah Spiller the quarterback? Can they do something? Your season's shot. So let it all hang out against Bama. I'm just curious to see. They have 3 great offensive pieces. Right? They have 3 great offensive pieces. The 2 running backs and Weidemeyer. They have a couple good defenders. They have some talent. They have some gaping holes, mainly offensive line and quarterback, which are kind of important.
Also, just to be clear, I've mentioned this before, I don't think they're very good at receiver. So they've got 2 awesome running backs and a tight end who hasn't been able to do anything because his quarterback can't get him the ball. And I guess we can run the lead option sort of, just the running backs running behind Weidemeyer, because that's all they got. And by the way, the other thing too, I just want to because we're talking so much about the offense and their issues, they lost 2 of their top 3 cornerbacks for the season, and they're about to go play John Mechie in Alabama. So good luck with that one.
Okay, I'm not saying it's probable. So, okay, they have 3 out of 11 good offensive players. I'm just curious. I just want to see my guys. I want to see Hayden Spiller against Alabama. I'm curious that, again, peak A&M, right? A&M at its best, preseason A&M. This was a game that a lot of people circled, right? Are they so far removed from what we thought that it's now laughable?
Yes.
Or can they get back? Can they get to some best version of themselves that can hang a little bit? Or no, you're like you think it's laughable.
If you set the line at 30, I'd still take Alabama. I think that this is going to be a bloodbath. I think that A&M is going to score less than 17 points, and I think that Alabama is going to score well over 40 points. So this game, I understand. Texas A&M still has one of the nation's best defensive lines. They have one of the nation's best running back combos, like you mentioned, and they don't have anything else that makes a football team. And it's cool. I don't know. I mean, honestly, the comparison's kind of there. They're kind of Clemson right now, except they have a running back instead of a quarterback. So, like, I don't know. Would you take Clemson right now to compete against Alabama? I wouldn't, but that's kind of what this team is, except probably worse.
Fine. Okay. I'm trying to find the good, because people thought maybe this would be a big season for Texas A&M, and of course it's not. All right. So Michigan in Texas A&M. Oot. We took care of that, so we don't have to worry about that later. So now we can just rank the 11 actual contenders that we have, Shehan, in order of how we think what their chances are of actually making the playoff. So this is not where they are right now. This is trying to assess where we think they are sort of in their path as a team. How much better do we think they'll get? How tough is their schedule? What's their conference like? Are they going to win their conference? So who is no, I don't have to reset. People know who the teams are. Who is your number 11 on this list, Shehan?
So this is an interesting one, by the way, because like you mentioned, you got to take into account how these teams are, like the quality of their teams, what they have going forward, their chance of beating those teams, and also sort of what's going to happen around. And so for that reason, I have Ole Miss 11. And the reason for that, because I will say, I mean, we can just go ahead and jump into it too. I have Arkansas 10. And the thing that differentiates them for me is that Ole Miss has already played Alabama. And so they can't conceivably have a tiebreaker over Alabama. Whereas conceivably, Arkansas could beat Alabama. And then, if they have one loss, they have a chance to make it to the SEC title game. Whereas Ole Miss is basically already eliminated from the SEC title game. And in a lot of ways, I think, is eliminated. That's going to make it very difficult for them to make the playoffs. So I think that Ole Miss right now is my number 11.
I completely agree with the reasoning on both those teams. I have Ole Miss 11. I have Arkansas 10 for the exact same reason, because as long as Arkansas still has the chance to beat Bama, Ole Miss doesn't have a chance to impress anybody anymore, and they lost their biggest game. So that's kind of it for them. And they're probably going to be out of our rankings soon. I did look at like the playoff predictor on ESPN. It only goes, I think, 15 deep. Ole Miss was on there at number 15 with a 3% chance to make the playoff. They didn't have Arkansas on there. I guess it's because like you couldn't view it backwards. Like, well, Ole Miss doesn't. Arkansas already lost to Georgia and has to play Alabama. But once you lose, playing a good team is not a has to, it's a get to.
Right.
And so Arkansas gets to, because they have something great they still could do. Are they going to do it? No, they're not going to do it. But they have the opportunity, and Ole Miss has lost that opportunity. All right. Theoretically possible. So who is your number 9 then? We agree Ole Miss is 11 and Arkansas is 10.
So we enter another tier here, I think. And so number 9 at the bottom of my Big Ten tier, I've got Michigan. I think that right now they do have games in front of them where they can prove themselves. But to me, until they prove that they're not going to be scared of Ohio State, right, that game is going to be there. And they're not going to have the tiebreaker in that case over Ohio State. So that's what it's going to take. I think that Penn State, even though Penn State might be at least comparable, if not a slightly worse team than Michigan, I don't think that they kind of have that same this sounds really mean, but that mental disadvantage against Ohio State that I think that Michigan has created for itself. And so Michigan, they have, I think it's still a really good chance because they still have an opportunity to play Penn State. They still have an opportunity to play Ohio State. If they go and they get through this schedule with a loss and find a way to make the conference championship game, or even if they go 11-1 and narrowly miss out on the conference championship game, I still think that they have a pretty decent chance of making it. But I think right now their path is a little murkier than the rest of the Big Ten.
I in the end wound up sort of ranking the Big Ten teams based on like who I think the best Big Ten teams are, because it's like They all sort of have a similar opportunity and who's going to win the games. And Michigan is probably going to get, as we talked about, I think on earlier when we let them in, they should get to 7-0, but then they have like a lot of ghosts, man. At Michigan State, that's always an issue for them in the Harbaugh era. Then home Indiana, at Penn State. I mean, that's a tough game, man. At Maryland, and then home versus Ohio State. So if J.J. McCarthy, this is about J.J. McCarthy elevating that offense to the next level. The run game is solid. Aiden Hutchinson is one of the best defensive players in America at defensive end. And if J.J. McCarthy or just Cade McNamara even plays a little bit, they just have not asked much of Cade McNamara. If the quarterback play improves, they've got some ceiling left there as well. But I agree that Michigan, of the 4 Big Ten teams that are in, they are my lowest. You have Michigan overall number 9. I had Michigan 8.
Okay.
So we're in agreement there. So who is your number 8?
Yeah. Who's your number 9?
Well, it might be your number 8. So I have Oregon. I have Oregon 9.
I have them actually up a little higher. I have them at number 6. And the reason that I say that is because Oregon's path is still very easy. And if they go through and if they go 12-1 and, they've got Cal at UCLA versus Colorado at Washington versus Washington State at Utah versus Oregon State. So they should win all of those games. And so if they do, not only do I think that they have a really good chance, they still would have a tiebreaker versus Ohio State if Ohio State is the Big Ten champion at the end of the year. So I think that does matter. Now I do say that, and we're in a world where Ohio State already 3 weeks later, whatever, is ranked ahead of Oregon because Oregon lost, which I think is insane, but that's a whole other thing. But, I think that when it comes down to it, if both those teams, hypothetically, Ohio State and Oregon, are conference champions at the end of the year, I think that that Oregon would have a slight edge. I do imagine both would get into the playoff, but I do think that that's going to give them a little bit of a trump card until they don't have it. The other thing too that I just have to mention is they should not have lost that game to Stanford. Stanford got so many extra opportunities because of lucky breaks, and I don't want to blame refs, because the reality is if you're in a position where the refs can impact a game, it means that you haven't played a good enough game to that point. But things got real weird at the end there. They were without Joe Moorhead, who I think is one of the most creative offensive coordinators in college football. Now, I don't know when he's going to be back. Like you mentioned, he's actually hospitalized right now. It sounds like he had a medical emergency on Saturday morning. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. Hopefully everything's okay. I do think that they're a different team with Joe Moorhead in the building. So I do think that they're going to I think have a really good chance to go 12-1. If they go 12-1, win the Pac-12, then I think that they're in.
I have Oregon that low based only on the fact of I don't think they're going to do it. That it's all there. Everything is there, as you said. But it's difficult because it's basically the same situation as Michigan. They have a true freshman quarterback that might be the answer. And you can find plenty of Oregon beat writers and sites that after that Stanford loss are asking whether Ty Thompson needs to be the quarterback for Oregon. Top 50 national recruit in this class. I think the number 7 quarterback in the country. And Anthony Brown just did not look like the guy. His completion percentage for the year is 57% or something. He found a way to get it done against Ohio State. And we had a lot of questions. We had questions for our contenders when we did our quarterback rankings early in the year. We had Jack Cohn and Anthony Brown sort of in a tier by themselves at the bottom of these are the worst quarterbacks for any real contender. And Jack Cohn in the end played pretty well early, but in the end has proven why we thought that. And Anthony Brown did what he had to do, made winning plays on the road at Ohio State. And now he's sort of proving why we said that early in the year. The Joe Moorhead situation, as you said, clearly affected them on Saturday, clearly affected Anthony Brown on Saturday. That's a difficulty. Kayvon Thibodeau, their defensive star, who'd been injured, came back against Stanford, but then got ejected for targeting late in that game, which had a little effect on the end. So a lot went wrong for them.
Yes.
Against an okay team, and they still kind of needed like a weird pass interference call to let Stanford to get it to overtime, right? So they might be able to get it back together. And everything you said is true. If they do, they're in. If they run the table, they're in.
Yeah.
I just don't think they looked like a team, even though they had a lot go wrong. Against Ohio State, it's like they did everything right that day without Kayvon Thibodeau. And then against Stanford, it was like, okay, well, everything went wrong, but you kind of also allowed yourself, while things were going wrong, like you couldn't figure it out against kind of an average team. And that just leads me to think, I don't think Oregon's going to be able to get through this season undefeated. And if they don't go undefeated, they're out.
No, they're out.
Right. So, I mean, not undefeated, but like, yeah, they have the one loss. They can't afford another. So, yeah, undefeated from here. So I don't think it's going to happen. So that's why I had them this low. But to your point, the path is not that hard. If they get quarterback figured out, like why? It does feel to me that Michigan is easing J.J. McCarthy in, not out of desperation because Cade McNamara is clearly not the guy, but because J.J. McCarthy might be better. The Oregon situation is a little bit, the people who are calling for it are like, it's not, Anthony Brown is not the guy. And I think that vibe of the situation matters when you are thinking about going to a true freshman quarterback. Again, we saw it with Notre Dame, right? It's not Jack Cohn. Go to the true freshman. He's not exactly ready either. So it's a similar situation between Michigan and Oregon, but I view them in different ways. So I have Michigan 9. I have Oregon 9. You have Oregon 6.
Yes. Sorry, I have to like write all these around because I took off Texas A&M, put Michigan on, so make sure I have the numbers right. But yes, I have them 6.
All right. So who do you have 8?
I have Penn State 8. I'm still not 100% sold on them, and the same deal, right? I'll go ahead and say I have Iowa 7, and the reason that I have Iowa ahead of Penn State is not necessarily because I think that they're going to win the game this weekend. I think that they probably will, but it'll be really close. The bigger reason that I say that is because Iowa only has to win the West, whereas Penn State has to beat Michigan and Ohio State for the East to make the conference championship game. So like Iowa could be in a situation to where they lose this game against Penn State, win the rest of their games, have one loss, and then it's a play-in game, right? So like that's what I think their big advantage is. Penn State is their only real game left this year. They're going to play Penn State at home, then they go Purdue at Wisconsin, at Northwestern, Minnesota versus Illinois, at Nebraska. And they should pretty easily, I think, win all of those games. So even if they lose the game this weekend, they're still going to win the West. I think it's going to be a runaway that they win the West. And then again, that puts you in a position where you're 11-1 with a play-in game to the college football playoff.
All right. So you have Iowa 7, Penn State 8.
Yes.
I have Iowa 7, Penn State 4.
Okay.
Because I think Penn State's the best team in the Big Ten. The playoff predictor has Ohio State with a 12% chance to get in, Iowa with a 21% chance to get in. So I think the playoff predictor is doing a lot of the reasoning you're doing here, right? That, hey, well, listen, Iowa is going to win the West. Iowa could lose to Penn State this weekend, run the table, and then either get a rematch with Penn State that with a chance to win it in the Big Ten championship game, or Penn State has stumbled along the way and they don't even have to worry about Penn State. So this is not like a must win for Iowa. It's really not, because I think Iowa is in as the Big Ten champ, whether they're 13-0 or 12-1. And this is probably the only game that looks reasonably losable, as you said, left on the regular season schedule. So I don't want to diminish the first top 5 game of Big Ten teams that doesn't include Ohio State in 25 years, because it's still a big deal. But it's not as big of a deal for Iowa as you would think. It is a big deal for Penn State because, say, Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan start beating each other and go 1-1 and against those 3 teams, and then who has another Penn State can't afford to stumble. So I do think it is a bigger game for Penn State, but I just think Penn State's better because I think they're a little more explosive on offense, and I think their defenses are comparable enough. In the SP Plus rankings, Penn State is 5 on defense. Iowa is 4 on defense. So they're both, it's almost like Georgia and Alabama kind of stuff, right? Like they're both awesome defensively. Offensively, Penn State is 23, Iowa is 72. So overall, in the SP Plus rankings from Bill Connelly at ESPN, Penn State overall is number 6. Iowa overall is number 15. That's why I have them there. And I do think that Penn State is going to go on the road to Iowa this week and win. Iowa is a 2-point favorite at home. Who do you think is going to win that game this weekend, Shehan? Which doesn't have to be the same as where you rank them and you're thinking for the playoff, but who wins on Saturday?
So I understand what you're saying about them having comparable defenses, especially in the SP Plus. And, you know, for people who don't know, right, SP Plus, that's a rating that really takes into account like efficiency, right? It's play to play, who plays defense at what level, right? And so Iowa and Penn State play to play, I think, are relatively comparable. The thing that I don't think that SP Plus takes into account enough, or if in this specific case, I think that generally that's a good rule of thumb, is to look at their sort of net efficiency. But Iowa is so disruptive on defense, and Penn State isn't, right? Like, I mean, they are, but like Iowa uses defense to play offense in a lot of ways, right? They are that good. They, in this past game against Taulia Tagovailoa, one of the best quarterbacks, I think, in college football, in my opinion, 5 interceptions, right? They have multiple pick sixes in their first game against Indiana. They pick off Brock Purdy, I think, 3 times against Iowa State. And like, we've reached the point where this isn't like a coincidence, right? This isn't just like, because that's the thing. Turnover plays tend to kind of even themselves out over the course of a season, over the course of a game even. I think that Iowa legitimately does things and coaches things and makes decisions and plays defense in a way that does force turnovers and make things easier for their team. So I understand what you're saying about Penn State and them having more on offense, because they clearly do. I think that Iowa's offense is very okay. But all that said, I think that Iowa right now is a better team. I think that they're playing better. I think that they really just work together a little better. I think that they're more proven as well. I think that Iowa State's better than Auburn, although whatever the rankings say, whatever. I think that Iowa State's better than Auburn, and they really kind of dominated those teams. And the other thing too, right, is that Iowa has dominated teams. I don't think that Penn State has dominated teams with as much regularity. It's going to be a really good game, right? I mean, I think this is going to be a really, really good game, but like, the other thing, the last thing that I'll take into account for this is I also feel like Sean Clifford is like the perfect type of quarterback for Iowa to take advantage of. You know, he's been fine. He's been efficient. He's completed passes. I think he's taken a step forward this year, but like, he's also somebody that when he gets under pressure, he gets a little loose with the football. And if he does that, I think Iowa can take advantage. So I agree. The pieces in place, especially on the offensive side of the ball, like you look at it and I think that Penn State's better, but like, I just think that Iowa manages games so well. They're also playing at home. I think that that's going to be the difference. And the other thing that I'll mention too about Penn State, just kind of a last thing, and a reason that I have them 8, is because not only do you have to go on the road to Iowa, you also have to go on the road to Ohio State. And I think I probably have Ohio State higher on my list than you. And you have to go on the road to Michigan State, and you have to play Michigan at home. So like, they have 3 of their top 4 difficult games are on the road. And again, I just haven't seen it to the point where I'm confident that this is the best team in the Big Ten. I think there's definitely a path for them to be the best team in the Big Ten. But I think that we're going to learn more about whether that can actually happen this upcoming week.
Yeah, the schedule for Penn State is legitimately tough. I do think Penn State's secondary is excellent.
Yes.
And I also wonder about Spencer Petras, and if I was going to have to throw the ball at least a little bit, I think, in this game. Even though Tyler Goodson is an excellent running back and can carry that load, certainly Iowa has a better run game offensively than Penn State does. Penn State just does not have that kind of dynamic run threat. You watch Penn State and a back will like get around the edge and you think like, oh, this is gonna be a big gain, and then he gets like a 3-yard gain. It's like, what happened? It's like they just don't have a dynamic guy, so that does affect them. It does come down to Clifford. I completely agree with you. Iowa leads the nation, 16 turnovers forced in their 5 games. That's forcing more turnovers per game than anybody in the country, and I completely agree that it's not coincidental. Most of the time turnovers are. I think it is not coincidental here, but if they don't force some turnovers, I think they're going to have a hard time moving the ball on Penn State, because I don't think that this is an offense for Iowa that's just going to take kickoffs and march 75 yards, 75 yards, 75 yards. I think they need short fields. And so that's a really hard thing. I think it's fair to assume they'll force some turnovers and get some points off of it, but it's not a guarantee. It's going to come down to Sean Clifford. This is Sean Clifford's game. Everything about Penn State season is about Sean Clifford, because it's the same thing we talked about. Man, if we didn't have Penn State as a contender early on, if we did, we would have talked about Sean Clifford the same way we talked about Anthony Brown and Jack Cohn. He's a veteran, but what has he showed that makes you believe in him? But he has done it more this year. He makes some plays off broken plays. He'll scramble and then keep his eyes downfield and throw. And then Jahan Dotson is as good as any receiver in the country. He is. And so Penn State's got some dudes. And I do think that's why I thought Iowa State would beat Iowa, because I just loved Hutchinson from Iowa State. And I thought he's like a dynamic threat that maybe Iowa doesn't quite have. And I know, what is it, Charlie Joyner? What's the Iowa receiver's name? I think that might be right.
I think you're right.
He's shown as something, he's shown some dynamic capabilities as well. But Jahan Dotson is the most dangerous offensive player in that game, as good as Tyler Goodson is for Iowa. So I don't know. I just think Penn State is more of a complete team. But Iowa's defense is the best unit. But I think Penn State's defense is closer to Iowa's defense than Iowa's offense is to Penn State's offense.
So, and just to wrap this all up, like you said, you're taking the gamble that Sean Clifford will not make mistakes. So good luck with that. All right, well, we can move on.
I know. It's hard. So, okay, so I do have Penn State. You have Ohio State then as the team in the Big Ten with the best chance to make the playoff. Is Ohio State your number 5, or do you have them even higher than that?
I'm number 4. And maybe I'm reading a little too much into going on the road and demolishing Rutgers. But, I look at the schedule, right? I don't know the team left on the schedule. I mean, maybe Maryland, but that's really going to be able to take advantage of that secondary, right? Because that's been the real issue, has been Ohio State's secondary, whether they play defense. And the other thing too, right? Because I actually think, and one thing that's interesting is that I do think that I would be very curious to see CJ Stroud at this point go up against Iowa. I think maybe by the end of the year, whether it's Stroud, whether it's somebody else, I think that they'll have some of those issues maybe worked out a little bit. But I don't know the team that's going to take advantage of it right now. In the next couple of weeks, get Maryland at Indiana. So you have 2 games before you have to play against Penn State, which you get at home, by the way, before you kind of have to have things really cleaned up, in my opinion. And so I still think that, again, they play Penn State at home. They play Michigan State at home. I think they should pretty easily win that game. They go on the road to Michigan. And again, I will pick Michigan to win that football game. When they go and win that football game, I'm tired. I'm done with it. I'm not doing it. And so if you kind of go and say, okay, well, they play the 2 games that maybe are a little tougher at home, and then they go on the road to play against Michigan in their rivalry game, the path is pretty manageable. For having to play, obviously, 3 top 11 teams, I think the path is pretty manageable. Then you have to play Iowa again in the Big Ten championship game. That's going to be a difficult game. It definitely will. But same deal. It puts you in a position where you're playing a play-in game. And for all Iowa can do, and for as impressive as they looked last week against Maryland, I do think that maybe Ohio State just has a little bit too much skill talent for Iowa to be able to handle. So I have them at 4. I don't feel amazing about it, but that's where I have them.
So I have Ohio State at 5.
Okay.
So my order of Big Ten teams most likely to make the playoff is Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan. Yours is Ohio State, Penn State.
Ohio State.
Yours
Iowa.
is Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, Michigan.
Yeah.
Right. So my thing would be, I think the winner of the Penn State, Ohio State regular season game wins the Big Ten. So that's where I would be on that. I think both those teams would beat Iowa on a fast track indoors in Indy in the first weekend in December. So that's why I have it arranged that way. The thing about Ohio State, I do think the difference maker for Ohio State at this point is Travion Henderson, the 5-star freshman running back. Super dynamic. When he gets in the open field, he puts stuff away. And as good as their receivers are, and CJ Stroud played very well I still think he left some stuff on the table. People give me a hard time people think I give CJ Stroud too much of a hard time because I'm still wanting to see some of the special throws. And a lot of times it's like, well, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are open. You don't have to be special. Just get them the ball and they'll do the rest. He did have a great play last week where he avoided a sack and hit Olave and then threw the ball like 17 yards to Olave and Olave like juked 3 guys and ran in 40 yards for a touchdown. But Tulsa's bad. And Ohio State led Tulsa 27-20 in the fourth quarter, and Tulsa's bad.
Yeah.
And since then, yes, Ohio State's gotten better. They rested their quarterback. He looked better. They've made defensive changes. They look better, but it's Akron and Rutgers. So I do think we could be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with Ohio State. People were high on Rutgers because Rutgers hung with Michigan and only lost to Michigan by 7. It was just, it's just a talent mismatch. So Rutgers never had a chance. The fact that the line was only 15.5 last week in that game was bonkers. Horrible line. So I don't, and you can see the talent on Ohio State's defense, the young talent coming along. You can absolutely see it. They are playing different guys than who played against Oregon. There's like 5 guys who were on the field against Oregon and like did not look good defensively who don't play anymore.
Yeah.
So like that's a big deal. And then CJ Stroud is progressing as a young quarterback would, and his shoulder feels better. So all that is true, but I still think Penn State and Iowa both have better defenses than Ohio State.
Easily.
And then it's a matter of who has the dynamic offense that can, well, Ohio State's still going to get something. You're not going to shut Ohio State out. So you've got to score a little bit. And I think Jahan Dotson, Sean Clifford, Parker Washington have a better chance to try to get something going and score enough points to outscore an Ohio State offense that is still good, but will be held down to some degree by those 2 good defenses. And I just think Penn State has the better formula to try to beat Ohio State. And to your point, Michigan has played scared or in their own head against Ohio State. Penn State does not.
Yeah.
They have not closed games out. They blew 2 games in 17 and 18 where they were ahead in the fourth quarter and Ohio State came back. But I thought that was more about Ohio State and that Penn State went toe-to-toe. They beat them in 16, toe-to-toe in 17 and 18. And then Justin Fields got here, and then they had a weird game they had a weird year last year, but that's established there. So I do think that matters. So those are where we have all the Big Ten teams ranked. We have a couple more rankings to do to finish this off. Again, it's the teams we think that have the best chance of making the playoff. We'll finish that list off next on the College Football Playoff Show.
The College Football Playoff Show, where the playoff never ends.
Again, would love to have you as a tech subscriber, 817-442-6789, $1 a month. And would love to have you guys listen to the Tuesday show. The Tuesday show is now a premium show. Premium ice cream, right? It's like French vanilla. I don't know. You got to pay for it. I don't know. I don't know. It's not gold plated. I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes here. It's just 2 dudes talking about college football. But if you kind of like this, then you'll kind of like that. So this one's free. Great. We're so excited that you're listening. And it's available on every podcast platform. And then it's like, well, do I want to pay 75 cents a show for a little bit more of these 2 knuckleheads? Some of you probably do. And you get signed up with your thumb. You scan your thumb on the Apple machine, the Google box, whatever. I don't know what it is. And then you're in. $2.99 a month. You buy everything else on Apple. You buy the latest Lil Nas X, who just slaps, man. He's awesome.
I'm a big fan.
My daughters, I just all day. My daughter's band, they play the Lil Nas X song during the high school football games. It's the best. That guy is the best. So you pay for him, and Shehan is the Lil Nas X of sports podcasting. So, everybody says that.
Are you the Jack Harlow? Is that what that makes you?
Oh, yeah, no, that guy. No. I know who that is because he sings the part. Yeah. I was going to say I'm like Tony Bennett. But no, I'm the Jack Harlow guy because that guy's not as cool as Lil Nas X, but he hangs out with him on the song, right? That's appropriate. Yes. That would make sense. Yes. Am I saying Nas or Nas? What is it?
It's Nas. It's like the rapper. It's like the other rapper.
Yeah, Nas. Yeah,
Lil Nas X.
Lil Nas X. Well, you put the Lil in front, and then it's a different name, Lil Nas X, right? But he's the best. So you pay for him, and you pay for us, and that's how you get it. It's the same thing. $2.99, not per episode, $2.99 for a month of Tuesday episodes. So you sign up, take care of it, and then they just take $3 out of your account. I mean, your grandma gives you Apple gift cards for Christmas. Isn't that what everyone's grandma gives them now? Right? What else are you going to spend it on? My kids, that's what they get. They get the Starbucks and they get the Apple gift cards. Okay. Would love to have you. Grateful for everybody listening right now. Would love to have you try the Tuesday thing for $2.99 for 4 episodes a month. Where do you have Cincinnati, my friend?
I have them 5 because I do think that we talked about it a little bit in the Tuesday show. They still need some things to go right? Like I think that they're going to go through. I think they're going to be 13-0. That's going to put them in a fight, probably with Oregon, with the Big Ten runner-up, and with Oklahoma. That's a battle that they can win. It's very possible for them to win that. But there are teams on this list that don't need stuff to go right, that know that they can play their way into the college football playoff. And so that's why I still have them just outside of that top 4.
We're on the same page here. You have them one spot behind the team that you think is most likely to win the Big Ten.
Yes.
So you have Ohio State 4 and Cincinnati 5. I have Penn State 4, Ohio State 5, Cincinnati 6, because I put those 2 Big Ten teams. I think it's to be a close game. I think one of those 2 teams will win the Big Ten. I think they both have a chance to win it. And then, so I put them both ahead of Cincinnati, but it's kind of like they're the same, right? I don't think Penn State and Ohio State are going to make the playoff. I just think their showdown will be close, and then one of them will make the playoff. I have Cincinnati 6, same reason. So I think we're kind of in the same zone on here. And again, if you guys, for those of you who have not yet subscribed to the Tuesday podcast, dug in a lot on Cincinnati. This Cincinnati is as interesting right now as they're going to get. So go listen to that Tuesday pod, which leaves the big 3 at the top. Everybody knows the deal. I will tell you the playoff predictor has Georgia number 1.
Okay.
87% chance to make the playoff, according to that. Bama number 2 at 86%. Oklahoma number 3 at 48%. So I'm assuming we both have Oklahoma 3.
Yes.
It's weird to put them here, because if we were doing our normal rankings of like, who's the best team? How do you think they played? We would have Oklahoma like 8th or 9th or 7th, but you're just assuming there's a chance they get it together. And you're asking yourself, who in the Big 12 is going to keep them from this? I do want to talk about this. Oklahoma, Texas this week. Is it Bijan Robinson? Could Bijan Robinson, is he the biggest hurdle for Oklahoma? Or do you think it is Oklahoma State or Iowa State or somebody else later in the schedule? Or is it this guy who is maybe the best running back in college football? And it feels like to me the type of running back who could win a game like this almost by himself.
Well, I will ask you a question real quick. So Mike Gundy took over Oklahoma State back in 2005. Can you guess how many times he's beaten Oklahoma?
6.
2. So this is an Ohio State Michigan style. Oh my God, he's in his head, right? So like that game, I think, you just again, same deal. You assume that it's Oklahoma unless Oklahoma loses, which they probably won't. So I do think that there's an argument that Bijan's their biggest hurdle left, but I think the bigger hurdle for them is just playing consistent football, especially on the offensive line, because they're better than Texas by quite a bit, in my opinion. And I think the other thing, too, is that they have a really good defensive line. They've been able to kind of hold teams underwater. Like, I mean, for everything you want to say right now about, how they've played, held Nebraska to 16 points, held West Virginia to 13 points. They have some dynamic players on each of those teams, right? Like, so they're playing pretty well on the defensive side of the ball. Now, obviously, Bijan's going to be a challenge. He's going to probably carry the ball 30 times again, like he did last week to beat TCU. If they can hold him to, under 5 yards a carry, whatever, like that's enough. I don't think that they need to do more than that. The bigger thing for me is them finding consistency on the offensive side of the ball. It is them leaning on those running backs. The other thing that kind of shocks me too, I was texting with a friend of mine who was a former Oklahoma reporter. Like they're not really working out anybody else at running back right now, which is something that it feels like they should be doing since they only have 2 scholarship running backs. I don't know what the plan is there. I don't know what their thought is, but I do think that this is one of those games where like it's a big enough game that maybe they still decide to play their running backs a little more and lean on them a little bit more. So if that happens, I think that opens up everything, right? Like I think that a lot of their issues this season have been the fact that they don't want to run the ball, and it kind of makes them one-dimensional because it forces them to not take advantage of what's underneath. We've talked about Spencer Rattler all year and how he doesn't want to kind of do those underneath routes. You know, he really wants to go over the top. The way that you can take advantage of that without throwing the underneath routes is by running some of that counter and some of that zone running, right? And so if they do that, I kind of think that this is going to be a pretty easy win for them. But it is Texas. It is a rivalry game. It is at the Cotton Bowl. I think I'm going to be there. We're still trying to figure out the credential side of that stuff. But, you know, I think it'll be a really good game. I think it's probably Oklahoma's toughest game left on the schedule. But to me, this is much more about Oklahoma figuring itself out than anything they have to face left on the schedule.
We're at the point where if Oklahoma loses, everybody's going to be like, well, of course they lost.
Yeah.
Like, it almost doesn't matter who the opponent is because they keep looking like they want to lose. Just like when Clemson lost to NC State, nobody was shocked, right? When they almost lost to Georgia Tech the week before. Oklahoma's at that point, but until it happens, you can't have them any lower than 3 because they're more talented than everybody they play. And they're certainly in if they run the table, and there's a chance they're in as a one-loss Big 12 champion.
Definitely.
So they even have some wiggle room. So they have to be 3 on this list. And we both have them there. I don't think we need to have a long discussion about Alabama or Georgia. I will say, as the guy who's had Georgia, thinking Georgia's the best team in the country for a while, I have Alabama slightly higher here because I think Alabama's built up the equity that if something goofy happens, or if they're the team that loses the SEC championship game, if they both get there undefeated and Alabama loses, I think Alabama's definitely in.
Yes.
Georgia is still probably in. I think we all agree, just plan on 2 SEC teams in the playoff. But Georgia doesn't have the same equity. And so in that room, Alabama got in as a 4 that a couple in 2017 or 18.
17.
What was it? I guess
17,
it was
yeah.
17. That year, where going in to Selection Sunday, I thought Ohio State was going to get in ahead of Alabama. It was very close, and Alabama got in. And being Bama was part of that. Now, Ohio State has that equity too, but nobody has more equity than Bama.
Right.
So I just I give them a slight edge in the get-in proposition just because. And then, frankly, the schedule, like Georgia's got Florida coming up, right? Georgia has, Bama, if they get past Texas A&M, Auburn, LSU, they've kind of lived through the teams that I thought had the best chance to maybe jump up and get them. So I think Georgia's better, but I would have Alabama 1, Georgia 2 in this ranking of best chances of getting in.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. You know, I did glance at the schedules before, and like you mentioned, Georgia plays in the East, but they do have a couple more tougher games on the schedule. Alabama's got Arkansas, who I think we saw this weekend that they probably just can't hang. They probably just don't have the athletes as yet. And then their other tough game is on the road against Auburn, and obviously a rivalry game in the Iron Bowl. And I will keep banging the drum. I think that Auburn's fraudulent. I don't think that they're actually particularly good, and I don't think that they can hang with Alabama. And the other thing, too, is, man, they have to – I don't know about that whole Bo Nix versus this Alabama defense thing. I don't know about all that. So I don't think that they have a game on the schedule that really should be especially competitive the rest of the way. And like you mentioned, if they make it through 12-0, they could cancel the SEC championship game and both would get in, right? Like, if these teams are looking at 12-0 at the end of the regular season, like it's over. Those 2 teams are in, and they probably not only could be, but I think probably should be the number 1 and number 2 overall seeds. We just look at the rest of the teams that we talked about on this list, right? Lots of them have a chance to make the college football playoff. At this moment, again, sitting here on October 5th, things can change. It's a long season, but sitting here on October 5th, I don't see the team that I feel comfortable saying will go and beat one of these 2 teams. I think that these 2 teams are still right now ahead above everybody else. And so I just don't. And in the SEC, the SEC, you hear all about the path and the schedule and all that sort of stuff. I just don't think that there's anybody particularly close to the class of these 2 teams.
Really easy November. Their next 3 weeks at least are interesting. As you said, you don't believe in Auburn. I think that's a reasonable thing. At Auburn, and then they get Kentucky, and Kentucky is the only other undefeated team in the SEC besides Georgia and Alabama. And then they have the rivalry game after a bye week. They have the rivalry game with Florida. So those are their next 3 games. And if they get through those, then they're going to skate. I even thinking that Georgia would be the number 1 seed, which is what we predicted in the preseason, I just thought they might stumble because they just don't have as much experience getting through here. But it looks like they're a team that has not yet peaked. And so the best of Georgia is still ahead, and they haven't given up a point in the last 2 games. So, and they played with their backup quarterback last week. So there's still a lot out there for Georgia, and I agree with everything you said. We're looking at Georgia and Alabama being the almost locks for the playoff at this point, unless Texas A&M springs it. No, sorry. Sorry, Jimbo.
Oh,
I tried, Jimbo. Shehan wouldn't let me do it.
What does, I mean, we're not going to spend, what does like a Texas A&M win look like? Like what is the stat? What is the performance? What does it look like?
They have 70 plays from scrimmage, and 60 of them involve Spiller and A-Chain. That it's like, oh, they each had 25 carries and 5 receptions. Cool. It's like they both were on the field every snap.
Does being one-dimensional against a Nick Saban team seem like something that's going to work? Good luck. I mean, see, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in this game is Nick Saban's going to line up, and he's going to say, every receiver, they could put 12 receivers on the field. We don't care. We're going to put them in man coverage, and we're going to dedicate like 9 guys to the box because, dear God, Zach Calzada's not going to beat us.
So listen, I'm just going to keep saying Alabama's going to lose, and then like finally when I'm right in 2031, I'll be like, told you so. Boom.
I think it would be hilarious. I would love to see it. And most of my enjoyment of college football is kind of led by what I think is funny. That's what's most important to me. But I don't see it. I just don't see it. I don't see even a path forward for Texas A&M in this game.
Unlike last week, I'm not actually predicting Alabama to lose because I tried to learn.
Set the line at 40. I'd have to think about it.
We'll do that. That we can do it for Michael Cera hooded sweatshirt. I'll take Texas A&M plus 40 against Alabama this week. All right, thanks to you guys for listening. Would love to have you on the texts. Again, it's $1. It's easy to sign up, and we just we don't drive you nuts. You know, it's not even every day. It's like here and there, surveys, little nuggets. You know, if you're not keeping up on every single thing with every single playoff contender, and then I think the surveys are fun. And then if you have a question, we'll take your questions. 817-442-6789. It's $1. I think if you haven't ever done something like it, it's sort of hard to explain to people, but it shows up as a text in your phone like it's from your friend. So it's like we're your friend, and I like friends. I mean, maybe you don't like me, but I want to be your friend for $1. So, and then we'd just love to have you on the Tuesday show. $2.99 Apple Podcasts. You have to get it on Apple. That's how it works so far. The Tuesday show, it's 75 cents an episode because you get for $3, you get 4 episodes every month. All right, and the Wednesday show here every week, every platform. Thanks to you guys for joining us. For Shehan Jeyarajah, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the College Football Playoff Show.
The College Football Playoff Show, where the playoff never ends.